Carl Jung discovered that you can perceive someone's genuine character by paying careful and sustained attention to just two specific things. Not their words, which can be rehearsed and calibrated for any audience. Not their achievements, which often reflect circumstance and opportunity as much as character. Not even their actions when people are watching, which are precisely the moments when most individuals are performing their most carefully managed version of themselves. Jung found that two specific psychological signatures consistently expose who someone actually is beneath the social mask they present to the world. And most people reveal these secrets continuously, without any awareness that they are doing so, in the ordinary flow of everyday interaction. Picture a moment you may have already experienced. You are sitting across from someone you believed you knew well, a colleague with whom you have worked for years, a friend whose company you have genuinely valued, perhaps, even a partner whose interior life you assumed you understood. They appear genuine in the ordinary sense of that word, trustworthy in their presentation, competent, composed, put together in all the ways the social environment rewards. But something feels inexplicably off. You cannot locate the source of the feeling with any precision, but your instincts are registering something that your conscious analysis has not yet identified, a sense that there is considerably more beneath the surface than the surface is revealing. Jung spent decades of his clinical and intellectual life studying what he called the persona, the mask that every human being constructs and maintains to present an acceptable, functional, and socially viable image to the world around them. He understood the persona not as evidence of dishonesty or manipulation in any simple sense, but as a necessary psychological structure that allows individuals to navigate the complexities of collective life. Every person wears a mask. This is not pathology. It is the unavoidable consequence of living in a world that consistently rewards certain presentations and consistently penalizes others. But Jung also discovered something that changes everything about how we assess character. That no matter how carefully and skillfully someone has constructed their image, no matter how much time and psychological energy they have invested in its maintenance and refinement, two specific patterns always slip through. And once you genuinely understand what to observe and why it reveals what it does, you will never be deceived by a false persona in quite the same way again. These are not complex psychological instruments requiring specialized training to deploy. They are specific, practical observations that reveal the deepest and most reliable truths about human nature. Truths that the person being observed is almost never consciously aware of communicating. And by the end of what follows, you will not only be equipped to perceive others with greater clarity and accuracy, but you will understand yourself, your own hidden patterns, your own automatic responses, your own shadow material, in ways you may have been actively avoiding for years. But here is what makes Jung's discovery genuinely unsettling rather than merely interesting. These two reveals do not only expose other people's character, they force you into direct confrontation with your own hidden nature. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing available to a human being is to accept themselves completely. These two psychological windows will show you dimensions of yourself that you have been quietly but consistently avoiding. Most people move through their entire lives believing they can accurately assess character by observing surface behaviors, looking for confidence, for apparent kindness, for markers of success, for social charisma. Jung understood that these are all components of what can be called the performance layer, the carefully constructed and continuously maintained image that individuals present to the world in their public interactions. The genuine person lives beneath this performance. And Jung discovered that regardless of how skilled someone becomes at image management, two specific psychological patterns will always and reliably reveal their authentic nature because these patterns operate outside the reach of conscious control. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Your greatest and most beautiful journey is the one that leads you back to yourself. Subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy and hit the like button, and let's walk that path together. Jung wrote that thinking is difficult and that this is precisely why most people judge instead. But judgment based on surface appearances is almost always fundamentally wrong, revealing more about the observer than the observed. True character assessment requires descending into the unconscious patterns that people cannot fake, cannot effectively manipulate, and cannot maintain conscious control over under the full range of conditions that life presents. Jung's first character reveal is shadow mapping, discovering someone's authentic nature by observing with careful attention who they judge most harshly and with what specific emotional intensity. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This unconscious direction shows up with particular clarity and reliability in our judgments of other people. When someone criticizes another person with unusual and seemingly disproportionate intensity, when their voice changes quality, when their body language shifts, when their emotional investment in the criticism clearly exceeds what the situation would seem to warrant, they are not merely making an observation about the person they are criticizing. They are projecting their own disowned traits onto that individual. Jung discovered that what we most intensely dislike in others is very frequently what we have buried most deeply in ourselves. The qualities we have rejected, suppressed, or exiled from our self-image because we have concluded, usually through early conditioning, that possessing them would make us unacceptable, dangerous, or fundamentally flawed. He called this psychological process projection, the unconscious mechanism through which we perceive our own rejected qualities in other people, rather than acknowledging them within ourselves. The stronger and more disproportionate the emotional reaction to another person's behavior, the closer you are getting to genuine shadow material. Consider a specific example that illustrates this mechanism with precision. Imagine a successful professional, someone who prides himself on his integrity, who has constructed his professional identity around the concept of his own authenticity and honesty. At every team meeting, he criticizes a colleague, calling him fake and manipulative. His voice acquires an edge when he discusses this colleague's apparent charm with clients. His jaw tightens visibly when that colleague receives acknowledgement or praise from leadership. The emotional intensity is unmistakable to careful observers, though he himself appears entirely unconscious of it. What Jung would immediately perceive in this dynamic is not evidence of the colleague's manipulation, but evidence of the critic's shadow. His intense and disproportionate reaction to the colleague is not fundamentally about the colleague at all. It is about a dimension of himself that he has rejected and refuses to consciously acknowledge. Deep within his psychological architecture, he wishes he possessed greater social skill, greater ease and fluency in human interaction, greater comfort with the performance aspects of professional life. But he has buried this desire beneath a layer of contempt for social performance, because he has concluded somewhere in his psychological history that wanting to be charming would make him exactly what he most despises in his colleague. He has solved the problem of his own desire by hating it in someone else. Jung wrote that we cannot change anything until we accept it. That condemnation does not liberate but oppresses. The condemnation of the colleague is actually a form of self-oppression, a rejection of a part of himself that could genuinely serve his development and his effectiveness. This is precisely why shadow mapping works with such remarkable reliability. When someone judges others harshly and with disproportionate emotional investment, they are invariably revealing something significant about their own internal conflicts. The traits they criticize most intensely are consistently the ones they have pushed into their unconscious and refuse to acknowledge as part of themselves. Leave the number 111 in the comments, in the symbolic and psychological framework that Jung developed across his lifetime. 111 represents the first authentic moment of self-awareness, the specific instant when a person begins to recognize that what they see in others is also, in some form, a reflection of what lives within them. If you have ever caught yourself judging someone and noticed even briefly that the judgment revealed something about your own hidden nature, 111 is your signal. Leave it here. But shadow projection is not exclusively negative in its direction. Jung discovered that we also project positive qualities, attributes we possess but are afraid to fully claim or express. When someone consistently places others on pedestals, describing them as extraordinarily talented or remarkably confident with an emotional intensity that seems to exceed what simple admiration would produce, they are often projecting qualities that they themselves possess but do not acknowledge or inhabit fully. The key in both cases is to observe. For emotional intensity, when someone's reaction to another person is disproportionate, whether the reaction is negative judgment or idealized admiration, you are witnessing their shadow expressing itself through the only channel available when direct acknowledgement is too threatening. This observation reveals not only what someone has rejected in themselves, but also what they secretly long to express, to inhabit, to claim as genuinely their own. The shadow contains not only what is dark, but also what is bright, the unlived potential, the unacknowledged strength, the desire that was suppressed because it felt too dangerous or too presumptuous to own openly. Jung's second character reveal is what can be called mask maintenance, specifically observing how someone behaves in the precise moments when their carefully constructed image is threatened or destabilized. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most people spend enormous and largely unconscious psychological energy maintaining who they believe they are required to be, performing the version of themselves that the social environment has indicated is acceptable and rewarded. This maintenance requires constant and exhausting effort, and Jung discovered that when someone's persona is directly challenged, when their mask begins to slip or their carefully curated image is suddenly questioned, their authentic character emerges in that moment of vulnerability with a clarity and a reliability that months or years of ordinary observation cannot replicate. The practical approach is straightforward. Observe what occurs when someone encounters unexpected criticism that they were not prepared to receive. Watch what happens when their competence is questioned in front of others. Pay attention to how they respond when they are caught in a mistake that cannot be easily explained away. Do they become immediately defensive, constructing elaborate justifications? Do they attack the person delivering the criticism? Do they deflect responsibility onto others? Or do they pause, absorb what has been said, reflect genuinely, and respond with authenticity, even when authenticity is uncomfortable? Consider another specific illustration. A marketing director who has built her professional reputation on being the calm and unflappable presence in high-stakes situations. The person who never loses her composure under pressure, who has carefully cultivated this as her defining professional identity. During a critical client meeting, the client questions her team's strategic approach and challenges her professional judgment directly in front of her team. In that specific moment, her persona cracks with a specificity and a completeness that no amount of professional training can prevent. Her voice becomes sharp and clipped. Her posture rigidifies. She interrupts the client, deflects responsibility to her team members, and makes subtle but pointed references to the client's own previous decision-making failures. The calm professional disappears, revealing someone who is deeply defensive about her competence, capable of sacrificing her team to protect her own image, and genuinely threatened by any challenge to the identity she has built her self-regard around. Jung would observe that this single moment of persona breakdown revealed her authentic character more completely and more reliably than years of professional interaction conducted under conditions where her guard was maintained. Under pressure, when the image she had invested so much in maintaining was directly threatened, her authentic psychological patterns emerged, without the filtering and editing that ordinary social interaction permits. Jung wrote that the foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. Her inability to receive the legitimate discomfort of professional criticism without defaulting to defensive and destructive patterns revealed that she had never genuinely integrated her relationship with failure, fallibility, and the ordinary vulnerability of being wrong. Leave the number 444 in the comments. In the symbolic language Jung drew from across multiple traditions, 444 represents stable inner foundation and, crucially, its absence. The moment a persona collapses under pressure reveals whether genuine interior stability exists beneath the constructed image, or whether the image is the only thing holding the psychological structure together. If you have witnessed someone's true character emerge under pressure, if you have seen the mask slip in a moment that revealed something the ordinary performance concealed, 444 marks that recognition. But here is where this becomes most powerful for practical character assessment. These persona breakdowns do not occur only during major crises or highly charged professional encounters. They occur continuously in small moments distributed throughout every ordinary day of interaction. When someone's phone dies and they suddenly cannot access the social media that structures their sense of being seen and acknowledged. When they are kept waiting beyond their expectation and tolerance. When someone fails to laugh at their joke in a social situation where laughter felt important. When they receive a compliment that does not match the specific validation they were seeking. Watch for the micro-expressions that cross their face in those moments. Listen for the subtle but unmistakable changes in vocal tone. Attend to the shifts in body language that occur before any verbal response has been constructed. These tiny moments when the mask slips reveal more about someone's genuine character than hours of careful and comfortable casual conversation conducted under optimal conditions. Jung understood that authentic character is not what someone chooses to show you when they are fully prepared and their defenses are operating smoothly. It is what emerges when they are unguarded, unprepared, or operating under genuine pressure. The most psychologically integrated individuals, those whom Jung would describe as individuated, demonstrate a quality of consistency between their persona and their authentic responses that is immediately recognizable to anyone paying genuine attention. Their public presentation and their private reactions align because they have done the sustained and often painful interior work of genuinely accepting themselves, including the aspects of themselves that are difficult, embarrassing, or inconvenient. Leave the number 528 in the comments. In the symbolic and vibrational framework that builds on the archetypal language Jung spent his career developing, 528 represents the frequency of genuine integration, the specific resonance of a psychological life in which the persona and the authentic self have been brought into coherent alignment through honest inner work, rather than through more sophisticated performance. If you recognize in someone you know, or in yourself, the particular quality of consistency that comes from genuine integration, 528 marks that recognition precisely. Beyond these two primary character reveals, there is a third pattern that emerges when they are combined into what might be called the integration test. Observing directly how someone responds when their own shadow material is gently and compassionately reflected back to them. This test reveals more about a person's character and their genuine capacity for growth than almost any other form of observation, because it shows whether someone is capable of genuine psychological development or fundamentally trapped in unconscious repetition. When you notice someone projecting their shadow with particular intensity, there is the possibility of gently and non-accusingly reflecting the projection back to them, not as an attack or a diagnosis, but as a question offered with genuine curiosity and genuine care. Notice that you seem genuinely troubled by people who seek attention. Have you ever experienced the desire to be seen more fully and held yourself back from expressing it? The response to this simple, compassionate question reveals more about their authentic character than any amount of continued external observation could provide, because it tests their direct relationship with their own unconscious material. The defensive response to such a reflection, the immediate counterattack, the outright denial, the turning of the question into an accusation against the person asking, reveals someone who is deeply defended against their shadow, whose character has become rigid through the sustained effort of refusing to acknowledge psychological complexity, and whose capacity for genuine growth is significantly limited by their inability to hold the paradox of their own contradictions. The integrative response, the willingness to pause, to consider, to acknowledge that yes, there might be something in what is being offered, that perhaps the judgment reveals something about an unacknowledged aspect of their own experience, reveals someone capable of genuine psychological maturity, someone who can hold paradox and use self-awareness as information rather than as threat. Jung wrote that the most intense conflicts, when genuinely overcome rather than merely suppressed or avoided, leave behind a quality of security and calm that proves extraordinarily resistant to subsequent disturbance. People who can genuinely integrate feedback about their shadow material develop this quality. They become more psychologically solid through self-awareness, rather than more fragile, more capable of genuine relationship rather than less, more resilient under pressure rather than more brittle. The practical application of these insights in specific relational contexts requires both skill and genuine ethical grounding. In intimate relationships, listen with careful attention to how a partner speaks about their former significant others, about colleagues who frustrate them, about people in their social environment whom they find difficult or offensive. Are they consistently and intensely bothered by people they characterize as selfish? This pattern may reveal their own unacknowledged struggle with healthy self-advocacy, with the permission to have and express needs of their own. Do they reserve their most intense criticism for people they describe as needy or emotionally demanding? They may be denying their own genuine need for connection and for being genuinely known by someone who matters to them. In professional environments, observe with genuine attention how colleagues receive feedback, criticism, or any challenge to ideas they have invested in. Do they immediately become defensive, redirect blame toward others, or attack the person offering the criticism? Or do they demonstrate the capacity to pause, genuinely consider what has been offered, and respond from a place of authentic reflection rather than automatic protection? This difference reveals their capacity for genuine growth and for the kind of collaborative relationship that sustained professional development requires. The most profound dimension of Jung's character assessment framework is what can be called the mirror effect, the inevitable and ultimately transformative recognition that everyone you observe is simultaneously reflecting aspects of your own psychological landscape back toward you. Jung wrote that your vision becomes clear only when you look honestly into your own heart, that those who look outside dream, while those who look inside awaken. The deepest and most significant purpose of developing skill at reading others' character is not the practical advantage it provides in navigating relationships and social environments, though that advantage is real. It is the awakening to your own psychological patterns that the practice inevitably produces. Every judgment you observe yourself making about others contains information about your own shadow. Every moment you notice someone else's mask slipping contains an invitation to examine the places where your own mask is held most rigidly in place. Every time you witness someone else's defensive response to challenge contains an opportunity to examine your own relationship with vulnerability, with failure, with the discomfort of being genuinely seen in your most imperfect and most human dimensions. Jung wrote that we are not what happened to us, but what we choose to become. The mirror effect reveals not only what you have been, but what you are genuinely capable of becoming. The full range of human possibility that you contain, including the dimensions you have not yet claimed or expressed. Every character trait you can recognize in someone else exists in some form within yourself, at some level of development or suppression. Every psychological pattern you perceive in them, people around you, is also in some configuration part of your own interior landscape. The critical, ethical warning that must accompany these insights is one that Jung himself returned to with consistent emphasis throughout his career. This framework must serve understanding, compassion, and genuine connection, never manipulation, control, or the inflation of a sense of psychological superiority. Jung wrote that where love reigns, there is no will to power, and where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking. The capacity to read character accurately can itself become a shadow formation, a tool of psychological dominance disguised as insight, when it is used to identify and exploit vulnerabilities rather than to understand and connect with the full human complexity of the people encountered. The warning signs that character assessment is being misused are unmistakable once you know to look for them. A feeling of superiority arising from successfully analyzing someone, which indicates that the insight is feeding the ego rather than building genuine understanding. Using observations about someone's shadow material or persona defenses to manipulate their behavior, which represents a fundamental betrayal of everything Jung's work was intended to illuminate. Becoming more judgmental rather than more compassionate as your skill at pattern recognition develops, which indicates that you are using psychology as a defense against your own self-examination rather than as a genuine instrument of understanding. And the most revealing sign, becoming deeply skilled at analyzing others' patterns while consistently avoiding the same quality of scrutiny directed inward, which is perhaps the most reliable indicator that the framework has become a sophisticated form of psychological avoidance. Jung spent his entire career studying the architecture of the human psyche because he believed, with the particular conviction of someone who had genuinely descended into his own depths and returned transformed, that individual consciousness was the foundation of any genuine and lasting collective change. He understood that every person who develops the capacity to observe clearly without judgment, to understand deeply without manipulation, and to relate authentically without losing themselves in the process, creates ripples that extend far beyond their immediate relationships. When you develop the genuine capacity to not participate in unconscious patterns, when you can receive others' projections without absorbing them, witness others' persona breakdowns without being recruited into the drama they generate, you create the specific quality of psychological space in which genuine and sustainable change becomes possible for everyone in your vicinity. This is the deepest significance of understanding Jung's two character reveals. They are not primarily tools for reading others. They are mirrors through which your own journey toward authentic selfhood becomes visible, navigable, and genuinely possible. The shadow projections you observe in others point toward the shadow material you carry yourself. The persona breakdowns you witness in others reflect the places where your own performed identity is most fragile and most in need of genuine integration. Every moment of genuine observation becomes, simultaneously, an invitation to deeper self-knowledge. Subscribe to Carl Jung philosophy and continue this journey with us, because the two reveals Jung discovered are not the end point of character assessment. They are the beginning of character development. Your own character development. Your own ongoing journey toward the authentic selfhood that Jung believed was both the greatest privilege and the most demanding obligation available to any human being. Every judgment you notice yourself making is a doorway to self-discovery. Every moment you witness someone else's mask slipping is an invitation to examine where your own mask is held most tightly in place. Every choice to respond consciously rather than react automatically moves you one step further toward becoming, as Jung believed was possible for each of us, genuinely and completely yourself. Leave the number 777 in the comments. In the symbolic language of quantum consciousness and the deep archetypal framework that informed everything Jung understood about the relationship between individual psychological development and the broader evolution of human consciousness, 777 represents the perfect alignment of genuine self-knowledge with authentic relationship. The moment when the capacity to see others clearly and the willingness to see yourself honestly converge into the specific quality of consciousness that Jung spent his entire life both studying and embodying. If these two reveals have illuminated something about both the people in your life and yourself, if this framework is offering you new language for patterns you have been living but not fully understanding, 777 is your declaration. Leave it here. Let this community know that you are choosing to see clearly, beginning with yourself. There is a moment in life when everything shifts, not outside of you, but within you. It is quiet, almost invisible, yet deeply undeniable. You begin to notice that the way you see others is no longer random. The people who disturb you, the ones who inspire you, the ones you cannot fully understand, they all start to feel like reflections rather than coincidences. And this is where the real journey begins. Because the truth Jung pointed to is not comfortable, it is not easy, and it is not something most people are willing to face. What you see in others is not just about them. It is a doorway into you. So ask yourself honestly, who triggers you the most and why? What traits do you instantly reject in others, and could you recognize them even slightly within yourself? Who do you admire deeply, and what part of you is still waiting to be expressed? These are not simple questions, but they are powerful ones. Most people spend their lives trying to control the outside world, adjusting relationships, avoiding discomfort, chasing approval. But Jung's work points in a completely different direction, not outward, but inward. Because real power is not in controlling others, it is in understanding yourself. And here is the paradox. The more you understand yourself, the less you feel the need to judge others. The more you accept your own shadow, the less others can disturb your peace. The more integrated you become, the less you need to perform. This is what real freedom looks like. Not perfection, not constant happiness, but clarity. A clarity that allows you to see people without illusion and still choose compassion. But here is the question most people avoid. Are you truly ready to see yourself without filters? Because it is easy to analyze others. It is easy to label, to judge, to interpret. But can you sit with your own contradictions? Can you face the parts of you that don't match the image you want to present? Can you accept that you are both light and shadow at the same time? This is where real growth happens, not in pretending to be better, but in becoming more whole. And once you reach that point, something interesting happens. You stop being easily manipulated. You stop being emotionally controlled by others. You stop reacting automatically. Instead, you observe. You understand. You choose. That is the difference between unconscious living and conscious awareness. So here is one final question for you. Are you living as the person you truly are, or as the version of yourself you learned to be? Take a moment. Be honest, because the answer to that question will change everything.